We'd like to thank Mainspring Companies for sponsoring Season 1 of The Next Entrepreneur. Mainspring celebrates the entrepreneurial journey, and we are very grateful for their support.
And then when the flood hit here 3 years ago, they were kicking our families out. So now autism is 1 in 59, right? So that's a lot of people. And you know how devastating that flood was. It's not like a flood waters come up to an autism home and say, oh, don't go in there. Yeah. It's going to be really hard for those guys. Yeah. We'll just go around this one and go over here. That doesn't happen. And so our families were literally living in cars.
Welcome back to the Next Entrepreneur podcast. My name is Andrew McClendon. I'm your host. I'm here with our producer, Daniel Sagona, and our guest today is Shelley Hendrix. Shelley, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much.
I am so glad you're here. We've known each other for about 17 or 18 years. Shelley is a great social entrepreneur as well as a for-profit business owner. She's a true force of nature in autism advocacy and grassroots political strategy. In 1999, Shelley founded the Unlocking Autism nonprofit, as well as spending nearly 10 years as the National Director of Grassroots Development for Autism Speaks out of Washington, D.C. She's an advocate extraordinaire and an incredible voice for the autism community. So, Shelley, again, welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you so much.
And I am so proud to call you a friend. I've known you for so long, and I am so proud of what you've done. And I watched you grow throughout your career, and what you do is exceptional.
Thanks.
So thank you for joining us. So I did kind of want to start with, whatever's going on in your life right now. Seems like something kind of cool has happened recently.
We've had an interesting summer.
Yeah. So you got married.
I did.
And you married a Scotsman?
I did. In Scotland.
In Scotland.
Yes.
So
there's just something about that, island.
Yeah. Well,
all of a sudden.
I just went there with my wife and youngest daughter for this first time just a few weeks after you had been there, at least your most recent trip, or maybe 2 trips ago for you. But anyway, and we just absolutely fell in love with it.
Yeah. It's a beautiful, amazing place. It's peaceful, and it's funny because I have a Scots-Irish heritage. So for me, when I got to go visit there for the first time in 1987, which is what started whatever very slow rolling ball that was to wind up getting married to somebody 32 years later. We touched into as soon as we crossed over the Scottish border, I was like, oh, these are my people. I could just feel it. You know, it's funny. You must have some sort of cellular memory.
Well, when I was there, the feeling that I had was, my father was from Scotland, and I remember him telling me how beautiful it was. Mm-hmm. And I had this distinct, feeling that, man, I wish I had gone to Scotland while he was still living so I could tell him, man, I get it. It's stunningly beautiful.
It is. It's gorgeous.
I mean, we started looking at real estate, it's like, well, maybe we could live in that little cottage, Yep. But
every 30 minutes that you drive there, it's like different scenery. You'd be driving along, 30 minutes later, you're like, oh, there's a giant mountain. And then you're driving along, and you're in pasture lands, and then all of a sudden there's the sea, and it changes constantly. So but also with sheep everywhere.
So you married in Scotland, and but you lived in the United States, and any plans for the future as far as maybe living across the pond?
Well, we haven't totally decided that yet. I think for right now, we're going to maintain a home here, and then a home. He's originally from Ayr, which is about an hour south of Glasgow. So he's going to maintain his home there as well. And then we'll just decide later. I think maybe one of these days when we retire, that would be a good place to go.
Yeah,
I would like it.
Oh, my goodness. Now, I haven't been in their winter, there during the winter time, but it was stunningly beautiful during the summer. But
I have a history, and I'm well known for being almost like the disaster whisperer. Like on Facebook, sometimes if there's a tornado happening in Kentucky, someone will post on my page and say, "I'm sorry, are you in Kentucky? Because we're having tornadoes. I need you to get out." So I went to Scotland the first time right after I graduated from high school. I'd worked at Burger King and saved up all my money. And I was like, "Dad, if I save up all my money at my job at Burger King, can I go to Scotland and England and Wales?" And he was like, "Sure." Because he was like, "She's never going to do that." And then I did it. And I was like, "Okay, ready to buy my ticket. I'm going." And
at the age of what?
I was 18.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally graduated from high school. I don't know why they let me do that. I have no idea. This is back
when... You
when...
went with friends? Or?
I went with 2 friends. And this was back when they had like IRA bombings everywhere. And, there weren't cell phones. We called home every other day. And
that was a dark time. Like in Ireland's
it was
history.
Yeah, they wouldn't even...
Northern Ireland.
And they wouldn't let me stay out past 10 o'clock at night. So I have no idea why in the world. They were like, "Yeah, sure, go to a foreign country by yourself. Have fun." And then I didn't come back until 2018, February of 2018. So I arrive, and Scottish weather is known for being rainy pretty much all year long. And I arrive, and it's sunny for 7 days straight. And they're like, "You broke the weather, but like in a good way. That's awesome." And it was immediately followed by this air mass that came in from Siberia. And there was, the day I was supposed to fly out, we drove for like 3.5 hours to get to the airport. And there's like 1.5 feet of snow inside the parking garage. And he goes, "You're not going anywhere. You're not going anywhere." And everything in Europe was shut down. Everything. And I got on Facebook and I was like, "I killed Europe. Sorry if anybody's trying to travel." It's ridiculous.
That's funny. So, okay, so I wanted to kind of dial it back a little bit because I know nothing about actually where you were born or where you were raised.
I was made in Taiwan.
Taiwan. Okay.
I was literally made there.
Okay.
My mom went over to visit my dad for their first anniversary.
Okay.
Ta-da!
They're not going to consider that too much information, are they?
No, I don't think so. They actually know. This is too much information, but they know the day that I was actually conceived. So every year my mother sends me a happy conception day card because they don't make them from Hallmark. So she makes me one.
Okay. So, and then you were born where?
I was born in Taiwan.
Oh, okay.
I was made there. I was born there. I lived there for a year. I've got all these crazy pictures of my mom holding me, and there's like a rice paddy.
Really?
Like a big buffalo, water buffalo.
And
little Buddha.
Where are you off to after that?
And then we moved to Maryville, Tennessee, which is where my mom's family has lived since before the American Revolution. So my 7 great-grandpa fought in the American Revolution at Fort Craig in Maryville. So we've had a history of like rebellion and standing up for our rights. It's like a genetic problem in our family. And then we moved to Warner Robins, Georgia when I was 5.
Let me back up a second. So wait, what was your dad doing in Taiwan?
He was in the Air Force.
Okay.
He was a captain in the Air Force.
Okay. And then you move. So is that where they live now?
They live in Maryville. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So
they made a big circle.
So you went to Taiwan, Maryville, and then to Baton Rouge? Mm-hmm. And so how old were you when you got to BR?
I was 9 years old. It was in 1978.
So you grew up in Baton Rouge?
Yes.
Went to school here?
Yes.
Right. And so tell me about, you've commented about your Joseph, he was just...
We actually
happy.
voted him into the family. He was a voted in Hendricks. We sat around. We had this little camper. It was this, in the 70s. So we had this little camper, and we would go camping all the time. And Chris and I were kind of, we were big kids. We were 8 and 6 and potty trained, and our parents could bring us out in the woods, and they'd be like, "Okay, go play in the woods." It was the 70s. So you could see you later. You're 6 and 8. I'm sure you can take care of yourselves. I'm going to sit in this hammock and read, and And Chris and I would wander off and see what we could find in the woods. And so we all had to sit down. I remember this very clearly. I don't know if they were already pregnant with him or not, but we sat there and said, do we want to change our lives or not? Because if we had this new little baby coming along, and we were such big kids, that was going to change the dynamic a little bit. So we all were like, yeah, we totally want it. They were like, do you want a brother or a sister? We were like, yeah, so we just want a baby.
Oh, that's cute.
So.
That's
And
sweet.
my other little brother that's 2 years younger than me, he's just the frick to my frack. Like, we have always been super, super, super close. And I apologize to him on a regular basis. We had one year that I posted happy birthday to him on Facebook, and I apologized for something that I had done to him. And then he wrote back and he said, I apologize for this thing that I did to you. And I was like, yeah, so I apologize again for this. And it just went on and on. It wound up having like 300 comments where we were publicly apologizing to everyone. And finally my dad was like, please turn this into a book. And I'm so glad I have this in writing now. He was like, I'm sorry. Remember that time I hit you in the face with the hoe because I was mad at you because you took the shovel? I'm sorry.
That's funny. So, so you finished your high school in Baton Rouge,
Mm-hmm.
and then
McKinley Panther.
McKinley Panther,
Yes.
really? Wow. So I saw where you went to Mount Holyoke College, and so how did you? Which is in South Hadley, Massachusetts. Is that right? So how did you pick that all women's college?
So, well, the all-women's college was part of the strategy. So when I was 16, my mother had been, working on developing my inner and exterior nerd qualities and my affinity for science. So I was really interested in how the foods you eat impact your psychological development or your psychological output. And that's what most 16-year-old girls are sitting around talking about, right? So it turned out that Mount Holyoke had an undergraduate degree in it, which was the only only college at the time in the country that had an undergraduate degree in that.
And what would that undergraduate? It's nutrition, or
no? It was an actual major that you would get a major in psychobiology about, and so your classes would be rooted in psychology and also rooted in biology because your behavior goes everywhere your skin does, and your mental health goes everywhere your skin does, and so do your cells. So it's all it doesn't belong in a jar. And I just thought that was fascinating, and it didn't hurt that it was really far away. So it was going to be an adventure, and I'm kind of an adventurous, get in the camper and let's go kind of girl,
Right.
And but there was the sticking problem of the 10 p.m. curfew. So when I was making the argument to my dad, I was like, it's a women's college. Like, how much trouble can I get in?
Right.
Seriously, it's in the country. There's not even a stoplight in the town. I'll be fine. And he's like, I don't know about this. And I'm like, no, it's really going to be okay. I promise I'll be really good. And again, I'm not completely sure why they said yes, but I think probably they were like, at that point, they were like, okay, bye. See you later. Have a good time. Have a great life. Someone else can answer your questions now.
So how was that experience for you? How did you like it once you got up there and got settled in?
I thought it was amazing. It was a little bit intimidating because America hadn't completely homogenized yet. So it was really funny. When you have these conversations now about what life was like in 1987, and you're like, I'm the old lady back in the day, in 87. But my friends were like, oh, that's cute. Where'd you get that? And I'm like, oh, I got it at Walmart. And they're like, what's a Walmart? Didn't know what a Walmart was. Had no idea. They had no idea what that was. And they
So
were
this is rural.
Right.
Massachusetts.
And they didn't have Walmarts in Massachusetts then. Right. And they didn't, they were like, oh, we rented this at Blockbuster. And I'm like, what's a Blockbuster? Because everything just hadn't. So they had their own products. Like I went to the grocery store and I was like, I've never seen laundry soap like this. I don't know what this is. It was just like I had gone to a completely different country. They were speaking fast and I couldn't understand them because they all had Yankee accents, and they would say words that I didn't know. I had no idea when I went off to college. I had no idea that I said the word fixin' as much as I do. I said, oh, look, it's fixing to rain. Everybody looks at me and they're like, what? I'm like, what? What did I say? Fixing to rain. I was like, yeah, they let me in as part of the, well, we've checked off Louisiana plan. We can report that state in our diversity. Oh, well.
So, but it's a beautiful campus.
It's gorgeous.
It's absolutely stunning.
And it was great because I was around a bunch of really smart, very strong women. And I was in it was kind of probably like a big, they'll all roll over dead if they see this, but it's probably like a big sorority. We had this big group of women that, every position that you held on campus was held by a woman. So there were a lot of leadership opportunities, and I took advantage of all kinds of opportunities outside of just the educational part that I think, played a role.
Including being the coxswain.
Yes.
On the...
yes. I satisfied my PE credits by yelling at people in a boat.
Tell us, how did you end up on the, what is the boat called? A skull?
I can't remember what it's called now. That's terrible. I can't think of what it's called right now.
But you were that coxswain. Yeah. You're the small person.
Yes.
On the front yelling, row or
right.
stroke.
I was right on the edge of it. There was a weight limit and a height limit, and I was like 1 pound less than the weight limit, and I was like right at the height limit. And I wanted to row. I didn't want to sit in the front and scream. I was like, I'm going to be a rower. And all the girls were like 6 foot tall, rowing, strong. And so I learned, I was like, well, I always kind of wanted to be a cheerleader when I was in high school. I might as well, starboard port, and I'd just be screaming at them. And we would go every morning between 5 and 8, and we would row on the Connecticut River, and it was just breathtakingly gorgeous and amazing. And I had told them, we were in the, they have the Head of the Charles crew race that happens every year in Boston, and if you're on the JV, then you go to the Foot of the Charles, which is basically the same thing, but they call it the Foot of the Charles. And I told them, I said, if you guys place in the top 20, you can throw me in the river, because whoever wins the Head of the Charles, they throw the coxswain in the river. And I told them, I was like, if you just place I was already doing applied behavioral analysis with them and rewarding their good behavior. I was like, if you guys place in the top 20, you can throw me in that toxic river. And they did. They took me up on it.
So I thought you were going to say it was just a cold river, but it was a cold,
no, toxic. No, it's cold and toxic. I was
toxic.
I was like, I'm scared it's going to give me a rash. Get me out of here.
So how did they do under your leadership?
Who?
Your rowing team.
Oh, I think they did. We had a lot of fun with each other. Yeah. And there was one race where because you would go down the river and then you would turn around and you would come back up the river, and you'd be rowing that direction. And this one race that we were in, I think it was actually our first race. We go all the way down the river, down the Connecticut River, like 3 miles, 4 miles, 5 miles, whatever it was. And we turn around, and right when we turned around, our rudder broke.
Oh, no.
So they shoot the gun, everybody takes off, and leaves us in this river going towards a waterfall, basically. And I'm like, what? We can't get out. Like, we can't swim in this river. This river has a current. It's the end of October. It's freezing. We're all wearing sweats. I'm wearing sweats. They're wearing, like, T-shirts because they have to row. And I'm like, we're going to die. This is it. This is the end. And I just yelled starboard and port so much because I had to get one side rowing, the other side rowing, and steer with how they were rowing, And finally, I just got so frustrated. I took my shoes off, I put them on my hands, and I was like sticking my arm in the water like this.
You were making your own rudder?
Yeah. And then when we arrived, finally, hours later at the dock, I was like cyanotic. They were like blue, administering first aid, and I was totally had hypothermia. It was great. It was awesome.
That is awesome. Okay, well, that is a good point to take a little break for a commercial message, and we will be right back. MBD Maintenance is a proud sponsor for the Next Entrepreneur podcast, and we greatly appreciate their support. MBD Maintenance is a commercial building and maintenance contractor. They will build your commercial building, maintain it. They do additions, remodeling, tenant improvements. If you need MBD maintenance for your commercial building needs, You can find them online at mbdmaintenance.com. Okay, we're back with Shelley Hendrix, and that's good stuff from your college days. Okay, so you graduate from college, and you get back to where?
I come right back to Louisiana.
Yeah. And
got married and realized very quickly that nobody cares that you have a college education. I got a job after I got a job actually working on a political campaign, and then the Thursday before the election developed appendicitis. So that was fantastic.
Good time.
Way to bring it to the finish there. And then I got a job working for Hilton Hotels after that, and I was a secretary and moved my way up slowly. I got my first big taste of politics, though. I had an internship when I was in college, and I was interested in environmental work and worked on developing a bill with Kip Holden, actually.
Really?
He took me under his wing, and I worked on policy development with him that summer for state cars to run on compressed natural gas.
Oh, wow.
And helped move it through the process and learned how the process kind of worked and got to work on it firsthand. And I was like, what? You can have an idea and come in here and tell people this idea and then things can change for the better? This is awesome.
Yeah, so you saw firsthand
Yeah.
How that works. Okay, so you're working kind of in the corporate world, but you're starting your family as well, right?
Yes.
And so you have 2 children of your own.
Yes.
Your oldest child, Liam, he was born with autism, right?
He was born.
Or however that.
Yeah,
How does that work?
Well, for Liam was developing normally until he was 17 months old.
Right.
And then something happened, and he, over a period of a couple of months, we started realizing he wasn't talking anymore. He wasn't pointing at anything. He was actually developed some physical illness issues, and he just kind of had disappeared. And we had videotaped him regularly, like every Saturday, because we were like, look at this creature, this is so amazing. And
he was doing all these achieving milestones all the way up to 17 months.
At 13 months, he was completely imitating me. We have him on film imitating me doing the itsy bitsy spider, which with little fingers moving like this, and trying to do it. And he just, it was like somebody turned the light off and left the room. It took us a while to figure out what was going on.
And so that was the start of your autism advocacy, right? That was the root of it right then. And so I was kind of curious what those early years of the diagnosis was like for you as a young mother. Mm-hmm. Your only child at that point has autism, and what was that experience like for you?
It was very difficult. My grandfather was a pediatrician, so I was, but he had just passed away, and I was not understanding why I kept going into the doctor and saying I have these concerns, and they were like, no, let's just give it another month or 2 and see what's going on. And for me, it was this, I felt really urgent about it to try to figure out what was going on with him. We finally had a daycare owner that told us that she thought he either had autism or was deaf, and I did not handle that very well. I've subsequently gone back and apologized to her, and we hugged it out. But I didn't handle that super well on a Friday night, and I was furious, because I knew he could hear. And so I was like, well, if this is autism, I need us to get on that. Like, do I go to the emergency room? What do I do? And I'm calling the pediatrician. I call the pediatrician. He was at a Christmas party, and he was like, I'm at a Christmas party. This is not an emergency. You need to come in on Monday. And I was like, well, it is for me. And I had to sit there all weekend with this broken heart, because the only thing that I had remembered from the one psych class that I took which was a total yawn festival, which is why I didn't major in psychobiology. No offense to any psychologists out there, but it just was like not my cup of tea. And the only thing that I remembered at that time was that mothers caused autism, and I loved Liam so much. And I was like, is this because I've been, have I been too absorbed in my career? What have I done to you to make you not respond to me? Like, what am I a cold refrigerator mother? There's this old piece of ridiculousness from the 60s that said that mothers cause this and that they're refrigerator mothers and they're cold and they're withdrawn from their children. I was like, I've never been withdrawn from, like, I've been up in your face for 2 years. What are you talking about?
I've never heard that.
It was a very long weekend. It was terrible.
Yeah. So at some point you start to take matters in your own hands, and
yes.
And in was it in 1999 you actually started your own nonprofit, Unlocking Autism?
Yes. So that's where kind of everything started to converge, all this random collection of stuff. So my random interest in politics, my random interest in psychology, my random interest in biology, my random interest in catering and planning conferences and events and stuff, all of that sort of swooped in together. And all of a sudden I had all the tools in my tool belt that I needed to go after this. And at the time, my husband and I were really concerned that they were saying it was impacting 1 in 500 children. And I was like, every time we would call a news outlet, they would say, oh, I'm sorry, we already did a story on autism this year. And I was like, really? Because you've covered salmonella like 400,000 times. So this is impacting 1 out of 500 kids.
At that time.
This isn't just some bad green onions on a fast food salad bar. Like, this is a serious thing and it needs attention.
So 20 years ago, the numbers were 1 in 500 were impacted. Mm-hmm. And we know now today it's 1 in 59. 1 in 59.
But at the time, because we were talking to other parents and we were finding other parents, we were like, this has to be 1 in 100 kids. It has to be.
Right.
Just from keeping track of people that we knew or whatever. And it turned out that we were right. It took the CDC a long time to figure out what Liam's particular birth cohort, what the ratio was, but it was 1 in 110. That's what we're like. You're from the class of 1 in 110.
Now tell me, what was the Open Your Eyes project?
So the Open Your Eyes project was our signature project that we started with. And, coming out of the 80s and the early 90s with all the things that were happening with the AIDS epidemic, and they had done the big AIDS quilt that they had rolled out on the lawn in front of the Capitol just to bring awareness to it. And we wanted to put a face on autism and put a face on kids that were impacted. And so what we did was we started this campaign, and it was like super grassrootsy, and we collected pictures of kids from families kids that had an autism diagnosis. We got kids from all 50 countries and from Puerto Rico and Guam, like all over the whole place. And we wound up putting together, we scanned them and laid them out on these little banners. And when you put the whole exhibit together, it was 5 football fields long. And we brought that up to Washington, D.C. and did some rally work up in Washington, D.C. to try to raise awareness and bring people to Capitol Hill, because I knew things had to change. I knew we were going to have to bring attention to it politically and through the media to activate it and get people to be interested in it.
Right.
And, I was like going back. I was like, oh, this is why I went to the women's college and we all want to burn bras and like rebel, roar. I'm a woman, hear me roar. This is my moment.
Right, right.
And then I found out that Washington, D.C. is kind of it's a hard nut to crack.
Yeah. Well, you ended up testifying at a congressional hearing.
I did.
Right? When was that?
That was in April of 2000.
In 2000. Mm-hmm. And how in the world did you, you're a relatively young person. You're tell me about that experience. That sounds fascinating.
Well,
how did Shelley Hendrix end up there?
So I have, I had put my OCD to work, and I was calling this poor producer at CNN like daily, trying to get her to do a story on autism. And about 15 months later, the story aired on CNN in October of 99. And in that piece, in that particular piece, she had also interviewed a congressman who at the time was the head of the Energy and Commerce. He was the head of Oversight and Government Reform. And his name was Congressman Dan Burton. He's from Indiana. And he's awesome. He's just a battle axe kind of guy. So he's like the one that's like screaming at the Clintons, and there's like all this stuff, and they're doing all the investigation stuff. It's a pretty heavy duty committee, and it's a pretty heavy duty position. And I picked up the phone, I called him, and I was like, hey, we're coming to DC. Can we meet with you? And he's like, yeah.
So this guy is on the CNN piece.
Yeah, because his grandson was diagnosed with
about autism. Mm-hmm. So you call him up and you say,
I'm like,
coming
hey,
to see you.
I'm coming to see you. And so me and my friend that started Unlocking Autism were like, have no idea what we're doing. We're going to go to Washington, D.C., and we're going to just, we're just going to take on the world, right? And this is before suitcases even had pop-up handles or wheels. I mean, we're just like showing up in our heels, dragging these massive bags all over Capitol Hill because we have no idea what the geography is. We have no idea how far apart those offices are. And we're just wearing ourselves out. And he's holding a hearing the day that we're there, but he told us to come by the office or come by the hearing room. So we go to the hearing. He stops the hearing. They go tell him that we're standing in the back. And he stops the hearing. And he comes out and he's like talking to us for a little bit. And he's like, okay, ladies, well, I only called a 5-minute recess. So, I'd really like to invite you guys to dinner so I can hear more about what's going on. And, this is the moment that I've been waiting for. I have a powerful congressman in the correct party who can do things and shake things and has a personal vested interest in autism.
He's passionate about it. Right.
He's super passionate about it. He stopped a hearing to have a conversation with me. And I look at the man, naive, innocent, blinking my little, I'm just in the big city girl eyeballs. And I say, oh, I'm sorry. We already have plans with a friend of mine. We're going to get pizza. And he's like he doesn't even move. He's just, and he's huge. He's a big, tall man, like little person. And he just looks at me and he's like, okay. And he just very kindly reaches in after. He was like, what? I have people like trying to lobby me and give me Caribbean trips or something. And what are you talking about? Yeah. So he pulls a card out of his thing and he writes on it. And he's like, this is my cell phone number. Because I'm sure he's thinking, surely they'll be idiots. And
they'll realize their mistake shortly.
They've realized this. They'll go on. And so he gives us his cell phone number. We don't even have cell phones. And so we go on with our day. Like, it doesn't even occur to us that this is a problem. So we go to our friend, and we're, like, getting ready to go get pizza with her. And she's like, we're telling her about our day. And we get to this part. And she's, like, literally beating us out of her apartment and shoving us in a car and gives us her cell phone. And she's like, call him on the way back to Capitol Hill.
Go there now. Find him.
What? She's like, what is wrong with you? Okay. So we go. So we get up on Capitol Hill, and he's throwing a dinner for all the people he's had there for the hearing, and he's like, yeah, come on in. They make room for us, and we eat this wonderful dinner. And then at the end of the dinner, he says, I'm so sorry I didn't get to talk to you guys because we had all these people here. So, tomorrow I can take you on a personal tour of the Capitol. And, great, right? We get our own personal tour of the Capitol with the guy that we came to see and have a conversation. And we're like, oh, I'm so sorry because the friend that we were going to have pizza with, like, we rescheduled. So we can't do this. And he's like, okay. And then we get home and we tell her, and she's like, call him right now and tell him you will meet him at 9:00 tomorrow morning. And we're like, okay, all right. So, he wound up being just a terrific asset. And we did go on the personal tour. And then after the personal tour, he was like, I'm going to hold this hearing, and I'd like you girls. Both of us came and testified actually in front of Congress at the same time. And he just wound up being just a super advocate. I'm still friends with his daughter. And the funny thing is that, years after that, people would invite him to come and speak at conferences or whatever. And if I was sitting in the audience, he was like, look, you guys, see this little girl down. Shelly, stand up, please. Shelly, stand up, please. I'm like, no, please don't do it again. And he's like, okay, I'm going to tell y'all a story. And then if this girl can come up here to Washington, D.C. and get stuff, like, all of you have no excuse. No excuse whatsoever.
Oh, that's funny. So, around this, okay, so you are doing Unlocking Autism now. I mean, that congressional hearing was early in your formation,
right,
of Unlocking Autism, and you continue to have that as an ongoing project,
right.
But you then delve into the corporate world, and you did some advertising account executive work and sales manager work for a business publication, and just that's where I met you.
Yep.
Right, because
Yep.
we my businesses purchase ads from you, and that's how I got to know you.
That's right.
Okay, so it was around 2008 then where you joined the Autism Speaks organization out of Washington, D.C., and you became the national director of the grassroots development. So how did you make that transition? I mean, were you looking to conquer, bigger challenges? I mean, what was going on there?
I always like a good fight.
Yeah.
Yeah. So during this time, during this background time, when we started Unlocking Autism, it had a political focus or a grassroots focus or awareness focus or whatever. We just kind of, it grew really quickly. We learned a lot of things. We'd never run a nonprofit before. The internet had just been invented. We didn't know really what we were doing, but we had amassed all these people. And in 2005, we started working. Our organization was working in conjunction with a number of other organizations to try to pass a piece of legislation federally called the Combating Autism Act, which was pretty historic because it secured millions of dollars specifically for autism research. And prior to that legislation passing, they were spending somewhere between $5 and $10 million a year on autism research. But it was impacting so many kids that we were able to secure kind of like a makeup funding. And so the NIH was, once this law was going to be passed, was going to be required to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on autism research to kind of get to the bottom of what's going on and why are there all these kids all of a sudden having autism. And so our organization sort of, our contribution to some, different organizations brought different things to the table. Our contribution was like grassroots shaping and teaching people how to do stuff. And we passed 2 laws that year. We passed the Combating Autism Act, and then we also passed another law that set up a congressionally directed medical research program through the Department of Defense for autism. So we had 2 autism research programs that got established in Congress. And for some reason, they decided to put me on the DOD panel to read scientific reviews or scientific proposals, and I'm on their programmatic panel, and I get to say, yes, I think this is a good thing to research, or no, we don't need to research that.
So that's a U.S. Department of Defense Autism Research Program?
Yeah. Yes.
And you were on that panel. And that was in 2007.
Right. And I hadn't been back to Washington, D.C. in quite a while because life and whatever was going on. And I just hadn't been there to do any kind of political anything. I mean, I'd done whatever I had done for the to help pass that legislation I had done from, down here in Louisiana. And when I went back up there, I was like, oh, these are my people. I like this. I love being in D.C. and I miss it. And on the way home, I called a friend of mine who had just been hired. Well, I didn't know that she had just been hired, but she had just been hired by Autism Speaks. And she was like, I've been meaning to call you. I am going to be the director of their government relations team. I need a good grassroots person. Is that something you're interested in? And I was like, yes, please. Because my dad keeps asking me what I'm going to do with my political science degree. So that would be amazing. And so I started, when are you going to use a political science degree? So I started working for them, and our primary initiative that we decided to work on was expanding insurance coverage for individuals with autism. And so Congressman Burton, our friend Congressman Burton that I was talking about, his grandkids' medical costs were not being reimbursed by insurance. So he fixed their little red wagon, and he went back to the State House, and he was like, fix this. And they were like, okay. And so they did in Indiana, and that happened in 2001. And then nothing else happened. The only state in the country that required coverage, all these insurance policies for all these families, they did not cover. Once your kid was diagnosed with autism, that's it. You're on your own paying medical bills. Like we do that to cancer and diabetes, right? You get diagnosed with cancer. Oh, you'll just have to pay all of your medical costs now. And so for kids with autism, they were like not paying anything. And so, I mean, we had experienced this as a family too. We needed to get Liam a gastrointestinal scope for a gastrointestinal issue, and they wouldn't cover it because he had autism. And we wound up having to fly him to London to get it done. But anyway, so I had a personal, beef.
Let's pause right there for a word from our sponsor. We would like to welcome a new sponsor to the show, Gear Train. Gear Train is a national testing, inspection, and audit company that works in the e-commerce fulfillment industry. So these guys provide the quarterly and annual inspections, preventive maintenance inspections, and they do testing and audits of conveyor systems and automated equipment in big distribution facilities. They support the entrepreneur's journey, and we're proud to have them as a sponsor. You can find Gear Train online at geartrainperforms.com.
So my job was to come in and to assess the grassroots across America and try to come up with a strategy and develop a strategy. And the strategy that I developed was we'll have one state in each region, because my goal as a visual person was to try to, I didn't want it to wind up being a regional thing. If you just do the South, then they're like, oh, those crazy Southerners. If you just do the Northeast, they're like, oh, those Yankees. If you just do the Western, oh, the hippies. So we got a little bit of everybody going. And we weren't even going to target Louisiana. And we had picked out Florida, Pennsylvania, California, and Michigan. Those are easy states, right? Breeze. I don't know. I haven't even ever been to Michigan before. So I'm like, okay, this is a breeze. And then we had an opportunity that year to introduce it here in the state of Louisiana. And I went back to my friend, who's now my boss, and I said, hi, I need $50,000 to hire a lobbyist. And she's like, Shelly, you've passed federal law. And I'm like, yeah, that's up in Capitol Hill. They're like, oh, okay, you're a girl, you can talk. This is Louisiana. So I need $50,000 to go hire 2 guys, and I'll teach the guys what to say. And they were really actually awesome guys. They gave us great strategies, and we all worked together as a team. But I was like, I need to hire some people because I'm, short and blonde. They're not going to listen to me. It's not going to happen. But we had such a great positive experience with it here in Louisiana. It passed positively at every single point. So we got 2 committees in the House and the House floor, and Representative Franklin Foyle was helping us lead this. This was his freshman year legislation. We were like, oh, we'll all try this together. It'll be a piece of cake. Not a piece of cake, but went well. And then 2 committees in the Senate floor, Bobby Jindal signed it into law. We're number 6, right? So that wound up being a really great testimony as I went around the rest of the country, because I could go to Connecticut and I could be like, y'all.
Louisiana did.
Hey, so like 3 years ago, Louisiana did this.
Yeah. So you ended up getting legislation passed, 87 laws passed in 44 states?
Yes. I helped lead the grassroots efforts in those. I was working with a team, so there was a team of people that were working on political strategy or whatever. But my part of the job was to do the kind of like what I did as a coxswain in the boat. I was like, call all the Democrats, call all the Republicans.
Yeah.
Everybody call this one guy that's causing a problem.
Right.
That was my job.
And I saw you using social media to do that as well.
Right.
And like 1 week you'd be all about one state, and 3 weeks later you'd be all about another state. You were all over the place. But it's really fascinating because in that position, you were able to be extremely impactful. And I saw where you were, as part of your role in Autism Speaks, y'all were able to have $3 billion in dedicated funding specifically for autism research, which is just amazing.
Well, it is, and when you consider that, I don't know what would have happened if we hadn't passed the law. I mean, maybe they would have just, out of the generosity of their heart, said, "Oh, you know what? We should make sure we invest in autism research." But because that law was passed, we know that much money was available to be invested specifically for answers for our kids, and it's been a little bit of a point of contention in the autism community because people are like, "We're not seeing any fruit from that. We don't." But science just takes a long time, and that's one of the things that I've learned on the DoD panel. So, it takes a while for them to come up with an idea and then write a proposal and then the government to fund it, and then they've got to do the trial, and then it doesn't even count until it gets published, right? And then someone has to replicate it because you have to have 2 trees that fall in the wood making no noise for it to make any noise. And so that all just takes time, and so now I think we're finally we're beginning to hit our stride as a community. They checked some things. They checked some boxes early on and said, this is maybe a thing. This isn't a thing. But we're really starting to now see some really amazing research that's starting to drip out of that pipeline that is going to be very impactful for individuals with autism, I think, in the near future.
Yeah, it's just amazing what you've done. And so I'm able to see a little insight to this in the work that we do in our charitable project, and how many challenges these families have in providing everything they need for their children in the way of medical services and the expenses related to that, and so
it's every single system is a problem. Every single system is a challenge when you have not for all families and not for all people with autism for sure, but for a lot of our families, every single system the education system is a challenge, the medical system is a challenge, going to church is a challenge. If your kid, for example, wants to stand up and have a sensory issue and take off all their clothes and grab money out of the bucket as it's passing, not that ever happened with us. I'm like, hey, you don't have a special needs kids program. Why don't you get that?
Yeah.
Because I need some Jesus on my Sunday morning to make it through the rest of the week. Right. And we're going to have to come here, and we're going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, and then you have unusual experiences like storms, or you mentioned
disasters,
Katrina.
I mean, even when we had the flood here in Baton Rouge, and that was a huge wake-up call for me too, because we had helped after Katrina. We knew that if we could get a family into even if we weren't able to do anything but help them get into an apartment with no furniture, if they could get in there and we knew that they could feel safe, we knew our families were resilient enough to figure out how to come back to life, So our goal with Katrina was to literally get them in an apartment, get them some blow-up mattresses and like $200 worth of food. And then we were like, okay, we got to move on to the next family because we just didn't have the funding to be able to take care of it. But we took care of about 250 families after Katrina. And then when the flood hit here 3 years ago, they were kicking our families out. So now autism is 1 in 59, right? So that's a lot of people. And you know how devastating that flood was. It's not like the flood waters come up to an autism home and say, oh, don't go in there. Yeah. It's going to be really hard for those guys. Yeah. We'll just go around this one and go over here. That doesn't happen. And so our families were literally living in cars because they had been kicked out of shelters. The hotels were all full. And
which for any family, that would be just impossibly difficult. But when you consider, the sensory experience, or however you would say it, for a child with autism, or a family with a special needs child, it's just over the top.
Yep.
And so,
and I have to give a little plug to Congressman Graves in this, because we have a good. He's not just our congressman; he's our friend for our family.
He's awesome,
and he is just amazing. And And he saw the stuff that we were posting on Facebook, and he just showed up like we were running a triage unit out of our house like everybody else. And he's like, hey, what's going on? And I was like, please help our people. And he has, he's fought so hard for just disaster issues in general, but he didn't forget the stories that our families were able to tell him. And he made sure that they were like, you guys need to come up with a plan for special needs kids.
He's a special guy.
He is.
He is exceptional, extremely intelligent, and
yep.
totally hands-on.
Yep.
So, you got a very special recognition just a couple of years ago when the local autism center was named after you.
Yeah.
Which I just was so happy for you and so proud. And I was wondering if you could tell me about that experience.
So I had about 4 years ago, I was on my way making yet another life change, and decided to start my own consulting firm, and decided that I was going to be.
At this point, you've stepped away from Autism
Yep.
Speaks.
Yep.
And you are on to your next gig, which is your own
My own
for-profit business, Different Beats Consulting, right?
Yes. And and so what I do is I try to find companies that should be marketing to the autism community, or companies that the autism community needs, and I try to glue them all together. Like, I look for things that would be good resources for our families and say, have you ever, my training that I got at the business publication was look for niche marketing. And so I was like, here's a niche group of people. They need your services. Go for it. Right. Or we need your company to do this. Can you do this with a product to make it a little bit different so that our people can use it? And so I have this wonderful client, and they totally took a chance with me, and they're based in Pennsylvania, and they had never expanded this division of their company into Louisiana. And they were like, we'd like to see if, we could, and they learned very quickly that you have to be able to run and duck and jump and swim and float and everything, because we were looking for a place during the flood. Right. So that was
floating's
hilariously great. Like, oh, I'm sorry, 90% of everything is destroyed. Yeah. This is a great place to set up shop, though. We're good people. Please don't run away screaming. So they we had the old Brighton school that's behind Jefferson Baptist had come up for sale, because they were consolidating campuses or something, and it came available. It was a perfect fit for my client, and so they were like, let's do it. So they got in there and they got it all fixed up, and we had this big happy day that we planned to announce their arrival in Baton Rouge, and help get that all organized for them, where the party planning stuff came into play. And we're standing there with like 300 people, and they're like, okay, pull the sign, unveil the sign.
This is the ribbon cutting.
Yes, at the ribbon cutting.
Of the new facility.
They're like, Shelly, go over there and pull the thing to pull down the sign. So I pull down the sign, and I'm like, ta-da! And it's up above my head. So I have no idea what it says. Nobody in the audience
You're
that's
being
looking
Vanna
at
White
it.
at this time.
Yeah, I'm just like, ta-da!
You're not looking back at the letters.
I just turned over the letter T. I hope it's the letter T or L. And everybody's like, ah! And then they're like screaming or crying or what, they're having some kind of crazy emotional reaction. And I'm like, that's a really strange reaction to have and I had proofed the sign. They had sent me sign proofs. They totally, what's that thing with Ashton Kutcher? Like they
punked you.
They totally punked me. I totally got punked. And I turned around and I saw it, and I just had a massive catharsis, like right there in the parking lot. I couldn't even talk. I couldn't even talk. And they were like, you have to come cut the ribbon.
What did the sign say?
It said Shelley Hendrix Autism Center, and they had named it after me. And I was still alive. Like, usually you name a building after someone dies. But I was like, thank you. This isn't any pressure at all. Not any, But we had to cut the ribbon, and I couldn't think of anything. I was just sobbing. And I was like, what am I going to say? That, okay, I need to have something to say. And I couldn't think of anything to say except for, I had all these things that were flooding back to me during that moment. This is going to make me cry. All these things are flooding back to me from the moment that my heart first got broken with Liam, through all of the trials that we'd been through in our family, personally and professionally, and all these battles. And it all just kind of surged up. And I went to cut the ribbon, and I just, out of my mouth, I was like, this is the day that the Lord has made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. And I cut the ribbon. And I was like, he has been with me through this whole thing, somehow keeping me afloat with all of the crazy stuff happening. And, and it's a blessing to our community to have them here. They're doing a lot of really innovative, cool things, especially for the older population, because we've been so focused on trying to get services in for kids that are little, but autism is a lifespan issue. And so our kids need paths to help them become reluctant taxpayers, just like us. And so we're starting to put those things into place through this really gracious company that's expanded here in Louisiana.
That is amazing. But I mean, what a fantastic tribute to you and all the things that you have done, for the last 20 years, locally and nationally. And when I saw that picture of you standing in front of that building with your name on it, I was like, man, that's what happens when you keep your nose to the grindstone. I mean, what a perfect example of how hard work pays off. And it's just a fantastic tribute. And I cannot tell you how proud I was of you, and I am of you.
Thank you.
And so that's just a fantastic achievement. But so what is next for Shelley Hendrix?
So I have my fingers in a bunch of pies that I probably shouldn't be touching, but that's me. That's what I do. I'm like, hey, I want to come over there and mess with your project. Right. So I'm working on some different things that I think are really exciting. There's this cool, we had to do, when I started with the insurance project with Autism Speaks, we had to do a paradigm shift where we're like, it's okay to pay for medical treatment for people with autism. And now we need to flesh that out a little bit. What do those treatments and therapies look like? What do our families need? And we've done a pretty good job of ascertaining some culprit genes that might be involved with it, but that's not the end of the story. And we've done all this stuff to kind of shore up our research around behavioral health treatment. But one of the areas where we've been really lacking is in physical and mental health comorbidities that impact people with autism. And there's this kind of lingering dinosaur thing out there that drives me crazy, because I still have parents of young kids that are diagnosed with autism. And they'll be diagnosed with a comorbid condition like a GI issue or seizure issue or whatever. And they're like, well, people, not so much with seizures, but something else will happen. And they'll say, well, people with autism, they just have that, as if, we don't need to treat that because
it's just autism. In that bucket. We can just,
it's in the bucket.
Yeah.
I'm sorry your kid's got,
yeah.
I don't want to talk about gross things, but your kid's got the thing going on and also has autism. So,
yeah.
Or we misinterpret behaviors. Sometimes a large number of individuals with autism may not be able to verbally communicate for whatever reason, and we misinterpret what they're doing behaviorally. So their behavior and their biometrics tell us what's going on with them. And what I mean by that is that, how social are you when you have a migraine?
Right.
Are you real social? No, not really. If your tummy hurts really bad, not the time Andrew's like, hey, I'm going to a cocktail party.
Right.
My next big thing that I want to work on, and that I'm currently working on, is trying to work with a group of, another group of assertive mothers who have learned this stuff over the last 20 years. And we're just primarily mothers. There's some dads too, but mostly I mostly work with other moms to create a a shift where they realize that there's some medical underpinnings with regard to autism. And if we treat those things, then sometimes the behaviors can get better, because the behaviors may be there because a person doesn't feel well and doesn't know how to communicate that, or doesn't know how to effectively communicate that. Like I know in our own family, Liam's had some difficult behaviors that have come up when he had impacted wisdom teeth that were killing. Like he was in so much pain, but he didn't have a way to explain to us what was going on other than what he was saying, which was making us run around to a bunch of different people who were not dentists, because he was talking about residual pain in other places. And so, so there's fun. I'm working on that. I'm working on some transition issues, because that's an important, that I didn't really want to work on transition issues to adulthood, when he was 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. But now that he's 23, like what's the next step for him? How do we help him get on a path to become even more independent than he's already become? And how do we help how do we cut that path for families that are coming up behind us too?
Yeah, so it seems like what you've done throughout your advocacy career is, begin to tackle problems that you're experiencing within your own family. Right. But the way that you tackle that is by bringing your political science and strategies and bake that in with all the other things that you've mentioned, and go and tackle the problem so that it impacts not just you, but thousands or hundreds of thousands of others, in the case of you doing the national legislation and things like that. So this is just the next step at where Liam is now. And that's really fascinating, and it makes a whole lot of sense. Well, look, I think this is about a good place to wrap it up. And so where would our listeners find you on social media?
I kind of usually sort of have that a little bit on lockdown, but if they're, because I don't go crazy on social media. I used to, but I don't post as much on it anymore.
Okay.
But we do have an Unlocking Autism page. There's an Unlocking Autism Facebook page. I have a Different Beat Consultant Facebook page, but nobody knows that because I've never really actually promoted that.
Well, now you can.
Now I can. And then I'm on there under Shelley Hendrix McLaughlin. I've officially changed my name on Facebook, so it's like a real thing.
Okay, well, cool. Well, Shelly, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. And, I think the world of you. And I love what you do. And I love watching your career. And I love how you have impacted so many people. And I'm just thoroughly proud of you.
Well, thank you very much. And you've been such a great friend for so long. And you've always been one of those cheerleaders. Like, I know I've done a good job when I get it, even if I just get Andrew McClendon like my post. I'm like, oh, he's watching and he's cheering us on. And, that's important. This has been a hard fight. It gets really discouraging at times. And I appreciate you giving us an opportunity to talk about things that impact this community. They're often still kind of hidden away. So being able to shine a light on that is a good thing.
Well, look, you're a wonderful friend and a wonderful storyteller, and I hope that you'll be able to come back and keep us posted and as things progress. And thanks again for being with us.
Thank you so much.
Well, you can't talk with Shelley Hendrix without laughing. This girl is fun and funny, on top of just being an absolute superhero. She just has impressed me for decades now in how hard she has worked for the autism community, starting her own foundation, Unlocking Autism. It's one thing for a family, for a mother or father to have to take care of a child with special needs. But when you go that extra step, miles long extra step of trying to serve the community as a whole and trying to bring together parts and pieces of this community that are trying to figure out what it is about autism and how they can go about addressing improvements in these children's lives. And Shelley is tireless and has been tireless for 20 years. And I think I just love being around people like Shelley. She's there's nothing that she won't do for that community. And now, since our podcast aired, there's President Trump signed a $3 billion appropriation to fund research for autism, and Shelley is instrumental in how that program is put into practice, and one of the main people involved in that program, with many others certainly. But so that's a tremendous milestone. $3 billion is just an unbelievable boost to that community. So very grateful for Shelley. She will continue to do great things, and we will continue to learn from her and follow up with her and see how she continues to impact that community. Shelley can be found at unlockingautism.org. You can hear more from the Next Entrepreneur podcast. You can find us on iHeartRadio, Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on Facebook as well. Propel Productions can be found at propelyourstory.com. Our producers today are Daniel Sagona and Benjamin Connell. And we are out.